I'll call the meeting to order. We have a packed program today and plan to go until 12:45. During the program, everyone will be on mute, so please feel free to submit questions by utilizing the chat function. Seth Rothstein will provide today's invocation. Seth?
You're unmuted now, Seth.
Thank you. Together, let us pray. For those who are sick, for all those who are suffering, for those who are lonely, for those who have no one to check on them, for families that are separated, for those who are unemployed, for those suffering financial hardships, for those who face an uncertain future, for those who are dying, for those who have died while saving the lives of others, for all who have lost their lives, for those who've survived, for those who've lost their spouses, for children who've been orphaned, for all those who mourn and those who comfort them, for firefighters, police, and emergency medical workers, for doctors, nurses, and all healthcare professionals, for those who serve in the armed forces, for public officials, for business leaders, for educators, for innovators and inventors who provide new solutions, for peace in our city and in our world, for renewed friendships among neighbors, for solidarity and unity among all peoples, for a greater appreciation and love of all humanity, for patience and perseverance, for calm in the midst of fear, for the grace to overcome adversity, for generosity of spirit, for hope in times of despair, for light in times of darkness. Strengthen us in this time of need, inspire us to acts of solidarity and generosity, and give us hope for a brighter future. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Seth. Our President-elect designee and membership chair, Jim Agee, will introduce today's Rotary's newest member. Jim?
Thank you, President Jerry. It's my honor to introduce Joshua Ogborn. He's the ViStar Credit Union Vice President at ViStar Tower Branch in downtown Jacksonville. Joshua focuses on bringing quality service to ViStar Credit Union members and keeps his employees focused and striving and excelling in all they do. ViStar's values match our own here in our Rotary Club. They include integrity, trust, respect, caring, courage, dedication, and loyalty. All of us know about ViStar Credit Union, and we're honored to have their name alongside ours and the brave veterans of the ViStar Veterans Memorial Arena. It's a long-standing landmark in the city of Jacksonville. It hosts countless concerts, sporting events, and more every year. You know, they received a unanimous approval from the Jacksonville City Council to become the partner, and that officially began in March of 2019. Those of us in the military, we know ViStar's history is deeply rooted in service to the military and veterans. They were founded in 1952 on Naval Air Station Jacksonville, Howie Wanamaker's old command. They've stayed true to those roots. They support veterans, civil service, military employees, and their families, and they sponsor and participate in so many military-focused events, charities, and other initiatives every year. Joshua himself, he grew up here in Florida. He's from Panama City. His main interest was sports growing up, first baseball and then football. And in fact, Joshua received a scholarship to play Division II football as a tight end and fullback in Owensboro, Kentucky. Joshua also has a degree right here in Jacksonville from FSCJ. Joshua is still interested in fitness and spends a lot of time in the gym. When he was still in Panama City, he competed in bodybuilding competitions and was awarded Mr. Panama City Beach and second place in the Mr. Florida Heavyweight competition. Joshua is a single parent, and as you would expect, most of his time is spent with his two children. His daughter, Jacqueline, is 9 years old, and she's into cheer and gymnastics. His son, Richard, is 5 years old, and like his dad, is into baseball. Richard just started t-ball. With Joshua so focused on his own children, it's natural that he's expressed an interest as an avenue of service with Rotary to be in youth service. He'll be serving either in Interact or Rotaract committees. Now, for those of you that are staying current with Rotary on our DACDB or our JacksRotary.org website, you've probably watched the Rotary International President Barry Raisin's message to all of us that the focus during his year will be on Rotaract membership development. President Razin wants all of us to focus on the next generation of Rotarians, and Joshua represents that, and he's going to help us develop more. I welcome Joshua Ogborn to the Rotary Club of Jacksonville, and along with President Jerry Kelly, Joshua and I, we are going to continue our long tradition of reciting the four-way test every time we bring in a new member. If all of you will, I know you're on mute, but you can just recite it right along with us. So the four-way test, and I want to hear a chorus here of Jerry and Joshua in this. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And is it beneficial to all concerned? Welcome, Joshua. Back to you, Jerry.
Thanks, Joshua. Welcome to the Rotary Club. Last week, I sent each of you an email regarding the process of voting on our second round of revisions to our club bylaws. This email contained instructions about how to review the bylaw changes, whether to email any questions you may have, and how to vote online or either accept or reject the revision. Although the previous board of directors recommended approval of the revisions, it is now up to you, the members, to cast a final vote to approve these bylaw updates. I urge you to review the revisions and vote. I also recommend taking time to review the entire set of bylaws. I want to thank Howard Kelly, Michael Fisher, past President Howard Dale, Tommy Grimes, and the entire Charter Bylaw Committee for their great work in this tedious process. I also want to remind our members that we will endure a similar process in the coming months as we review and update our Rotary Club's Charity Foundation. If you have an interest in serving in any of these areas, please let us know. We can certainly use your assistance. Today, past President Hank Cox received his undergraduate degree from the University of the South, Sewanee, and his law degree from the Washington and Lee University. He served as president of the Florida and Jacksonville Bar Association. He also served on the Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission and the Florida Supreme Court Innocence Commission. He has been recognized with the highest awards of the criminal law section of the Florida Bar, the Florida Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the Florida Bar Foundation, and the Jacksonville Area Legal Aid, just to name a few. He and his beautiful wife, Mary, a graduate of Wellesley College and Duke University School of Law, have 3 children, each of whom has a law degree. Hank, thank you for being here today and introducing our speaker.
Thank you, President Jerry. I appreciate it. Before I begin, something else. I promised many of you that I would wait until this meeting to explain why I canceled the Republican National Convention. I know everyone had reasons. Some of you felt it was unfair to the Times Union to have the RNC here because it would take away from the daily reporting about the JEA over the next 3.5 years. Others know the Jaguars were beginning practice and it ran the risk of increasing the percentage of Republicans in the J lot from 82 to 93%. But actually it's because the host committee had asked for, and I very proudly gave, a check of $1 million to the Republican National Convention Host Committee. And I canceled the convention because I was concerned that it would be adverse publicity for me because, as most of you are probably aware, the check bounced. So, getting to what we're here for, it's my privilege to introduce the Honorable Erin Perry. She's a native of North Florida in the Lake City area, undergraduate work at the University of Florida, then law school at the University of Florida, where she also worked with the university's child protection team. She began prosecution in this circuit, soon a division chief, prosecutor of homicides, and tried over 65 jury trials. She is also, for the benefit of this club, very active in the South Jacksonville Rotary Club. She was appointed to the bench by Governor Scott. She is engaged in several community projects and spends time with her family and especially her daughter. But now, like many of us, her working world has changed. The pandemic has orders from the Supreme Court of Florida that seriously limit almost all access to the courthouse and to the courtrooms. The jail released Friday that it has over 450 inmates who tested positive. And before the pandemic, the estimates of persons that would travel in and out of our courthouse, just in Duval County, ranged between 6,000 and 10,000 people a week. So with thousands of cases, felonies, misdemeanors, civil, commercial, landlord-tenant, probate, what is it you do about that situation to serve the people of the Fourth Judicial Circuit. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and judge, the Honorable Erin Perry.
Thank you, Hank. It's such a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I am a proud member of the South Jacksonville Rotary. I didn't know much about Rotary until I was invited to a lunch not too long ago by Jason Burnett, a friend of mine. He's an attorney here in town. And he invited me to the South Jacksonville Rotary for lunch. And I saw the 4-way tests and immediately knew these were my kind of people. And this was the place where I would love to be a member. And so I'm thankful to be recently inducted into the South Jacksonville Rotary as of December of 2019. And I just wanted to, I did get some questions leading into this discussion today. There were some questions that I will address towards the end of my discussion. And I will also be happy to take, to a limited degree, some questions, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability and to the best of what I'm allowed to answer them. Courthouses and courtrooms, as you know, are different than any other structure that you might be going into. Whenever you're going out and about on a daily basis, you're going to the grocery store, you're going to the gas station, you may be going to Target. These are all things and places that you have options to go to. You are allowed to enter those premises and exit whenever you like, and you have a good amount of freedom to go about wherever you would like to and feel safely to in those places. A courthouse is different. We bring people in, and as Hank said initially, he said that about 10,000 people per week. I think the average per year, a number that I received from some of the administrative staff here, was about 600,000 people are processed through this courthouse every single year. That is a substantial amount of people that come and go. And prior to COVID-19, the only safety concerns they had, and I say only because even though they're big, are physical safety. Guns, knives, weapons, people bringing drugs into the courthouse. All those were the things that were monitored by security and bailiffs. So now, if we are to when we reopen, we're going to have to take into consideration things such as temperatures. We're going to have to take into consideration any sort of symptoms a person might have been feeling that day, and that adds a whole other layer. And when somebody is not given a whole lot of choice to be in court, that changes the whole dynamic. We're requiring people sometimes, when you're appearing in court, you're sometimes subpoenaed to be there. Jurors are summoned down to the courthouse, and victims may feel compelled, and their family members may feel compelled to be in court, and that if they're not in court, they may feel as if justice is being administered without them. So right now, we have completely shut everything down in the sense of nobody comes into the courthouse, except on a very limited basis. And so to let you know what it looks like down here in the courthouse, we have very few people up on the 7th floor where we have our judges, our judicial assistants. Normally we have halls full of people where we're handling hearings, and our hearing rooms are busy. People are waiting to get in. That does not happen at all now. Everything is occurring via Zoom or whatever platform the attorney may recommend or request, and over the phone, because we can't risk having people exposed to COVID-19 while they're mandated to be in court. So we're trying to do as much as we can to allow the proceedings to continue without endangering the individuals who have cases or matters before the court. On the other floors, we have our courtrooms, our courtrooms, and typically in those courtrooms we hear, for the most part, by and large, are criminal courtrooms. Those are the ones that see the most daily action in the courthouse when we're normally functioning. Right now, what we're doing is we're having everything via Zoom. In order to accommodate it, we're trying to make sure that we're reasonable regarding waivers of appearance. A waiver of appearance is when an attorney says, Your Honor, my client is communicating with me. However, I'm asking to waive his appearance, which is absolutely allowed. That way we can proceed with the hearing, we can proceed with the proceeding without requiring someone to be there and be present, even via Zoom. So we have going on, we have civil hearings, we have family law hearings, our first appearance court hearings. All those are appearing remotely and via Zoom. We have one courtroom that is up in the courthouse and has people coming in and out. It's courtroom 308. Typically those are for individuals who are coming in on a very limited basis to enter a plea. They were previously charged potentially with a felony. Their charge has been reduced to a misdemeanor by the state attorney's office, and they're coming in to appear remotely. So they'll come into the courtroom, they go to the podium, and they appear remotely for another judge in another courtroom. Some concerns that we've had with Zoom and that have been raised in articles that I've read or in just discussions I've had with other judges or attorneys are lack of availability or poor connections. Not everybody has a great Wi-Fi connection. Not everyone has great internet connection. And we don't want to, my concern is people who may have access to coming down to the courthouse may not have great access to the system whenever they're required to appear via Zoom. And so that is something I'm mindful of. Public access, typically courtrooms are open to the public. People can come and go without necessarily having to identify themselves to a great extent. They're able to be there and watch the proceedings, but they are also monitored to an extent as well. When I have a courtroom full of people, I'm able to tell if someone's recording the proceedings based on maybe seeing a cell phone lifted or them having some sort of device if they were attempting to record. And you're not to record proceedings. And so when we're appearing via Zoom, a concern people have are unauthorized recordings of the proceedings. And so that is something to take into consideration, especially when you have special victims such as child victims, people testifying about sensitive matters that we need to know what exactly the scope of the involvement of the people who are in the Zoom hearing or the Zoom meeting are, what they're doing. And then, but then on the other hand, courtrooms are public places and we need to allow in individuals who would like to observe. And so we're trying to balance as best we can. Like I said, the ways we're trying to balance this, we're trying to make sure we're liberal with the waivers of appearance for defendants. I have formulated in my division a written order and plea in absentia. What I allow people to do is if they wish to enter a plea, they don't have to appear, sometimes they don't have to appear on Zoom, as long as there's a written plea in absentia and then a written order sentencing the person and requiring them to report down to the courthouse within 5 days for fingerprinting. So that's another thing we allow in the courthouse is when individuals have to be fingerprinted, they come down and are processed through the first floor of the courthouse. We're making sure that as best as we can, I maintain. So through the process, this is a work in progress for sure. Initially, I used to have a different meeting ID for every court day, and my thought behind that was ensuring the security of the courtroom and not, I'd heard stories of lurkers or people popping in unannounced and potentially inappropriately coming into the courtroom. And so my thought was the best way to deal with that was to change the meeting ID each day. That was proving to be problematic for the public defender, the assistant public defender in my courtroom, who was having to notify her clients of a different meeting ID each day, and it was just trouble. It was a burden to her, and so to make it a little bit easier and streamlined, I now keep the same meeting ID number, but I'm very mindful and cautious regarding my waiting room. So I control my own waiting room in my courtroom and bring people in and out as convenient. So what I do, I allow every attorney into my courtroom, my virtual courtroom, and allow them to watch the proceedings as they see fit. So I can make it as public a forum as possible and make it to where people feel as if they're in a courtroom as best as they can. Speedy trial is a question we often get. What's happening to the individuals who are sitting in jail? That is a concern. The kinds of cases I see as a county court judge are misdemeanors, and by and large, the individuals that appear in my courtroom are not in custody on solely a misdemeanor. They're not being held in custody on a petty theft or driving under the influence alone, for example. If I have anybody in my division that's in custody, it's because there may be an immigration hold, a felony case that's holding them in custody, or the like. Speedy trial is told, but individuals who are in custody right now, I imagine are going to be first up on the list for trials whenever it comes time for the courts to reopen. Landlord-tenant laws, and I'm trying to move along fairly quickly, so bear with me if I'm just kind of speeding through it. Landlord-tenant rights are a question that came up through the things that were sent to me from Scott. The question was, I'd be interested in hearing what Judge Perry has to say about the court's leniencies regarding tenants' lack of payments to landlords, if there's any leniency at all, and has Judge Perry been seeing an increase in landlord-tenant issues since March? And if so, is there a correlation to unemployment caused by COVID? And what have been the outcomes or the verdicts? There's actually been a slowdown since the executive orders have gone out from Governor DeSantis, and even Mayor Curry issued some announcements regarding Federal CARES Act and some supplements that were provided to individuals who are facing issues regarding the payment of their rent. By and large, a lot of the attorneys who were plaintiffs' attorneys in these landlord-tenant disputes started assessing their cases and determining whether or not an eviction was appropriate at the time. Many of the individuals that I see may end up filing an eviction for cause. So what I typically see, non-payments of rent are not going to come before me right now. I'm not going to have hearings regarding non-payments of rent due to that executive order. And this relates specifically to residential leases. Okay, that's what I'm speaking of right now. I do not hold those hearings because I think there's a requirement and order from both the executive order, but as well as Chief Justice candidate that prohibits us from handling those. But in addition to that, I'm mindful that, and I think all parties are mindful, and we're sending orders out to remind the defendants that they are still required to make payments, that an eviction will be potentially on the horizon if, in fact, or when the stay is lifted, which right now it says August 1st, and we haven't heard anything different to this point. And that writs will be executed as soon as that stay is lifted. And the writ is the means by which the sheriff's office goes in and makes sure that property is vacated by the tenant. So like I said, evictions for cause are still occurring. A for cause eviction is essentially a violation of the lease. And it's not a non-payment violation. It is based on perhaps a person wasn't allowed to have animals on the property and does, or perhaps, for example, in Jacksonville, maybe someone is housing someone who is known to have been involved in a shooting within the apartment complex, or is an active evader of a warrant, for example. So those people who may fall within those particular violations of the terms of the lease, I can hold those hearings, and I have been having those hearings, and I've been making rulings based on those. And those rulings are based on the law, and if I do find there is a direct and intentional violation of the terms of the lease, then an eviction is appropriate. Unlawful detainers are still being heard. An unlawful detainer is brought before a court. An example of a situation that may require that is if a parent has an adult child living in their home, and they have allowed this child to live in the home, and they're saying, I'm now revoking their permission to leave or to live here. I've now asked them to leave, and they are not leaving on their own accord, and they get the courts involved to try to help with that. An unlawful detainer is not included in that executive order, and I have been holding those hearings remotely and have been issuing orders regarding those. If there is any leniency that does exist, because we're still able to sign those final judgments of evictions for which there have been no substantial defense raised by the defendant, we can sign those, but they're being held. So the writs are not being executed by the sheriff's office. They have deemed it not within their purview at this point to go beyond the executive order, and they've interpreted it very strictly and narrowly, and they are not issuing a good portion of the writs. I don't know of any at this point. I should have double checked before this meeting to see if any of mine had been executed to this point, but I don't believe that they have. And August 1st, just to remind you, is the deadline or the end date on the last extension granted by Governor DeSantis. And we have not heard anything else about that potentially being extended any further. But to remind you, I think Governor DeSantis extended the last one within hours of the deadline, or within hours of the end of the last one. Some other questions I got: what are the top 3 issues facing Duval County Court over the next 6 years, in my opinion? And so I was thinking about that, and I wanted to make it relevant to the discussion today. I think our first concern is going to be very imminent, and we're in the middle of it right now, is reinitiating normal proceedings after a mass shutdown. And I'm not talking shut down in terms of shutdown of the system as far as we're still having hearings and doing the best that we can, but it's been a mass shutdown because we haven't had people in this courthouse in a very long time, since March. I mean, when you consider that we were seeing 10,000 people a week in this courthouse and we have gone to essential workers only, very, very few people are coming into this courthouse. Reinitiating that is going to be quite a challenge. We have on a regular basis prior to COVID, we had armed JSO officers, armed security guards, civilian bailiffs, all working to ensure the safety of all the people who entered into this courthouse, as well as the judges, the staff, the clerks. They worked very hard, and it was very much logistical concern every day to make sure that everybody entered safely. Now we're adding the layers of, like I said previously, any potential symptoms a person may have, temperature checks, making sure that they haven't come into contact or gone out of state to places that are coronavirus hotbeds, for example. And so we're going to have to establish what questions are going to be asked at the front door to ensure when we do open back up, we're opening safely. And it's not like we're looking at waiting for a vaccine to be initiated. We're hoping that we can get this rolling as soon as it's safe to do so. And so with that, how are we going to address the backlog of jury trials? How are we going to address, there are civil cases, there are criminal cases, all needing to have their day in court, and people are wanting things to be done timely, and how do we do it efficiently? And if we're going to do it remotely, how do we make sure that a person is getting a fair and just trial? Another matter that the county court is facing, is every county court in the state of Florida, our jurisdiction recently increased. So county court judges handle civil claims also. So for example, a neighbor suing a neighbor over a tree falling into something, it's truly the people's courts. We're hearing matters of less than $30,000. Somebody suing somebody for less than $30,000. That is a jurisdiction that was increased, or limit that was increased recently this year, January 1st of this year. And so because of that change, the court also saw a change in who was handling any appeals. And right now, although county court appeals are normally handled by circuit court judges, our appeals are being handled by First District Court of Appeals. So that is a very interesting change. What should concern our current Duval County judges and all county judges in Florida is the increase that is looming on the horizon of 2023. Our jurisdiction will increase to $50,000. And so with that, how will that affect our ability? I already have pending within my division, and that's with continuously moving cases, continuously issuing orders, and having a steady hearing schedule, even in the midst of a pandemic. I have 1,300 pending civil cases and about 150 to 200 at last count criminal cases. So when we increase our jurisdiction, we want to make sure we're being able to address every case efficiently, and making sure everybody's got their hearing dates, and not backing up our courts to the extent that people don't feel like they're getting not getting justice on their case. And then thirdly, I would say, and this is just a simple concern within our court, is the growth of Jacksonville. In conversations I've had with some commercial real estate brokers and things like that in the last few weeks, there's been a substantial increase in interest in properties down in Jacksonville from individuals who are coming from the north, or in areas where Corona has had a more substantial impact on their economy, and they're looking to come to a place where they can still run and own their business and successfully do so. So there has been a lot of interest, and I'm not sure I'm sure there's somebody on here who knows better than I do exactly how much interest there is, and that's just going to increase we're expecting a population increase, and we want to make sure that with the 17 county court judges that we have, that we continue to operate smoothly and efficiently as we can. And I think there's been some questions come up, and I just want to make sure I get to those.
Judge Perry, the question was that you hadn't addressed was on commercial leases. landlord, tenant, and commercial leases. What is the impact of the coronavirus on that?
Well, my understanding and discussion that we had this morning is that, and you're talking about, there are many different judges up here and many different takes on what the executive order says. However, the general consensus is that commercial real estate leases are not covered by the executive order. The intention of the executive order was to ensure that people didn't necessarily lose their homes at a time when they were required to be at home, or their places of business are being shut down. So there are different, there are of course some assistance for businesses and as well as assistance for tenants of residential leases, and it's, I guess, the hope that they're getting that benefit in order to protect the landlords in those cases. And I think that's the best that I can answer that, Mr. Kelly. I couldn't do
That's a difficult question.
without making it, you know, or getting close to saying how I would rule on a particular case. I couldn't
Right.
get.
We were just looking for direction.
I understand, and an attorney would be better suited to answer that than a judge who might potentially have to rule on it, I would say.
Thank you. There's a question here from Bill Sorensen, and his question is, has there been a broad discussion in the legal ranks regarding the impact of the pandemic as it pertains to the Sixth Amendment protections, and so what is the thinking?
Well, as far as Mr. Sorensen, are you concerned about the access to the courts and the trial?
I think speedy trial is probably his concern.
Well, to address what that is our number one concern, because we have people sitting in jail right now who don't have a bond set. Some of them have no bond set. Some people have very high bond set. And so the discussion is figuring out how, when we do open back up, how we're going to address who gets to the trials first. Because normally what we do is we put about 400 people in a big courtroom downstairs on Monday morning, and we qualify the jurors, and we then send them off to different courtrooms. Well, how are we going to do that whenever we're pre-vaccine or not everybody's gotten the vaccine? How do we safely bring people into the courthouse and require them to sit, you know, within close proximity to one another and still have these trials? So that is a huge concern, and we don't have the answer really yet. We're doing the best we can. I think they're trying to do a trial run on maybe some virtual trials, but we're looking for volunteers for that. I know that the chief judge has reached out, and some of the civil court judges have reached out and tried to see if anybody would be willing to use their case as a sample case. And I think the one that was willing to do it, I think they resolved it prior to the trial. So we're trying to be as cautious as possible. I mean, you think about, I read an article not maybe last week or the week before about a jury trial that was virtual from another jurisdiction, I think even a different state, and some of the issues that were already brought up on an appeal were one juror was working out during the trial. One person got up to make a sandwich. And so I think they were treating it as if they were watching television, as opposed to they were a part of a system in which everybody was really hoping they were paying attention to every word that was coming out of the witness's mouth and paying attention to every piece of evidence. So it's very hard to, I hope that answers your question. It's hard when I'm not face-to-face with you.
Yeah, I think it pretty much resolved that question. There's two other very interesting questions. I think that one, with Zoom being available to us now, once we go back to regular order, whatever regular order is, what is Zoom's function then? Can people continue to appear via Zoom? Is that going to be something that's available?
I see Scott Monroe, who is a defense attorney. He's going to ask that question because he's going to want to appear in court occasionally, because I think that is convenient for a lot of people. And I think when I'm looking at an attorney who's taking time away from their office and coming downtown and parking and getting into the building, it is convenient, but it's extremely stressful for a lot of other people. So the defendants who have to appear, or the elderly individuals who are trying to log on and handle these landlord-tenant cases, it's not convenient for them. And it is I think it's stressful for them. And they don't have great connections, and the screen is pausing, and they can't tell where I'm looking, because I should be looking at the camera. Instead, I'm looking, at the person's coming across my screen. It's just not comfortable with it. So I don't know. I don't think that we have an answer to that yet. I think It would be, in a ideal world, I might do it more in my civil hearings than I would in criminal court. And I'd be interested in a conversation about that a little bit further to see how we should implement that or keep it if we do.
And I have one more question, and this is going to be direct to you. With victims no longer being able to show up in court, what procedure has the court put in place to foster compliance with Marcy's Law?
So the state attorney in my division has been excellent at making sure that the victim is notified. I was a prosecutor for a long time dealing with victims' families and victims themselves. And so I'm mindful, very mindful that a victim has been notified of court, of what has happened in court, notified of any offers that have been made. And that existed prior to Marcy's Law because I felt like it was something required by statute before it was even constitutionally enacted. So what I do is ask and make sure that the state attorney has notified the victim of all major actions within the case. I am even happy, and I have had victims come in to the virtual courtroom and observe also. And that is, if it's done, it's usually, I've seen it done through a defense, or not a defense attorney, but an attorney, a private attorney who the victim has retained, and they both came into the virtual courtroom. And it also is available to anybody who, and the state attorney knows that a victim can appear via Zoom. And they've done that on a couple of occasions.
Thank you very much, Judge Perry. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Y'all have a great day. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. At the start of the new year, our leaders have hit the ground running. Most of our committee assignments have been confirmed. I ask that each member take a scroll through our fabulous website and view the list of club committees. Committee activity is vital to our existence. We need each of you to serve in some capacity. Please look at those committees today and let us know where you'd like to serve. For those who've already made a commitment, thank you. I want to thank everyone who has worked hard behind the scenes. Thank Judge Perry for her effort today. We have great comfort, other great programs coming up. We encourage your attendance each Monday at noon. Thank you all for staying with us and staying engaged. And that concludes this meeting. Next Monday at noon, we will be hearing from Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, Mike Bruno. He will be talking about balancing security, social issues in our cities. Thank you very much for attending, and that concludes today's meeting.